Leave your keys and move out, my dad said over coffee. Wyatt needs a home for his family. I nodded and left. The next day, they got a bill for $2,650, the first month's rent. You know that moment when your whole life, everything you thought was true, shatters right in front of you? I had one of those days. It started with my brother's engagement announcement. All smiles and sparkling diamonds, only to spiral into a full-blown family ambush where my own parents tried to steal my home right out from under me. Asterisk, asterisk. It was Sunday dinner, the usual Brennan family circus at my parents' polished oak dining table. The same table that had witnessed decades of quiet drama. Sunlight spilled through the leaded glass, painting everything in a warm, deceptive glow. More roast, Callie? My mom asked, her practiced smile not quite reaching her eyes. She always saved her real warmth for Wyatt, my brother, the golden child. Darling, tell everyone your news again. Wyatt straightened his collar, flashing the glint of a watch that cost more than my first car. Rebecca and I are officially engaged. He beamed, his teeth unnaturally white. Her parents are thrilled. Old Philadelphia family, you know. Dad raised his crystal water glass, his eyes flicking to me for that familiar, assessing glance, always judging against their idea of proper families and proper futures. My throat went bone dry. Congratulations, Wyatt, I managed, taking a small sip of water. The antique clock in the hallway chimed 4 times. This house, grandmother's house, stood solid, filled with the whispers of 5 generations. Stories that these people, my family, never bothered to hear. My simple linen dress felt like a stark uniform next to Mom's designer ensemble, her tennis bracelet clicking like a nervous tick against her plate. Dad, in his golf tan and burgundy sweater, looked every inch the man who measured success by country club memberships. Then the coffee arrived in grandmother's Wedgwood cups, the blue flowers reminding me of her gentle, all-seeing eyes. That's when Wyatt cleared his throat. Actually, there's something else we wanted to discuss today. Mom and Dad exchanged a glance so practiced it barely registered. Yes, Dad said, setting down his cup with precision. We've been thinking about the future of this property. The air shifted, dropping a few degrees even in the sunshine. I felt it before I understood it, like prey sensing danger. The thing is, Callie, Dad slid a manila folder across the polished wood, straight toward me. With Wyatt starting a family, we've been discussing the best use of family assets. Assets? My heart hammered. Legal documents, he clarified, tapping the folder with a manicured finger. For transferring your grandmother's house to the family trust. My coffee turned to bitter ash on my tongue. Transferring my house? The family house, Mom corrected smoothly. It was always meant to be the Brennan family. Home for generations, not a single person's project. Dad continued as if I hadn't spoken. Wyatt needs a real home to raise a family. You've had 7 years here already. 7 years, as if caring for grandmother during her final days was some kind of luxury vacation. As if returning home with my marketing career in ashes at 27 was a victory lap. I inherited this house, I said quietly. Grandmother left it to me specifically. Which was a lovely sentiment, Mom interjected, stirring another sugar cube into her coffee. But practically speaking, Wyatt has real prospects now. A fiancé from a good family. Future. Grandchildren. The unspoken message hung heavy in the air. Unlike you, maybe you can find something near where Lottie lives, Mom suggested, mentioning grandmother's former housekeeper. With barely concealed distaste. Those apartments near the east side seem suitable for your situation. That's when it hit me, a physical blow to the chest. They had planned this. Coordinated this. Ambush around Wyatt's announcement. My family, sitting in my dining room, in my grandmother's chairs, plotting to steal the home she had entrusted to me. Heat rose in my chest, but my face remained carefully neutral, a skill honed through decades of Brennan Sunday dinners. I reached for the folder, my fingers steady despite the storm raging inside me. I'll need to review these, I said, my voice surprisingly level. Dad leaned back, satisfied. Of course, it's just a formality. The trust lawyer can handle everything by the end of the month. The sheer confidence in his voice, the absolute certainty. I'd comply, nearly broke my composure. I stood, tucking the folder under my arm. I should get going. I have some work to finish tonight. I didn't specify what kind of work. They'd never asked. Don't overthink this, Callie, Wyatt said, his tone a sickening blend of condescending and concerned. It's what's best for the family. I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak further. The walk to the front door felt impossibly long, each step on the 100-year-old hardwood a searing reminder of what they wanted to take. Later that night, in my home office, I opened my laptop. The screen illuminated my face in the gathering darkness. I typed a short, encrypted email to an address I'd used only twice before, *trigger documents. 9:15 a.m. tomorrow, *. I hit send and closed the computer. In the quiet of the house, I heard grandmother's antique clock chiming the hour. Time to make choices that couldn't be unmade. The next morning, the doorbell chimed at precisely 9:17 a.m. I smoothed my charcoal pencil skirt and adjusted the cream silk blouse I reserved for closing deals. Through the leaded glass, I spotted a chaotic cluster on my porch. Dad's silver BMW sat askew in the driveway, one tire on the lawn. He always criticized me for not manicuring properly. I opened the door before they could knock again. Good morning. My voice carried the calm of someone who had rehearsed this moment for years. Please come in. Dad barreled past me, his burgundy golf sweater from yesterday replaced by a rumpled button-down. What is the meaning of this? Cloverbank Mortgage called me at 7:30. Behind him, Mom clutched her designer handbag like a shield. Her pearl earrings didn't match her necklace. Details so unlike her, it screamed volumes. Wyatt hovered at the threshold, his usually perfect hair uncombed, his eyes darting around as if seeing the house for the first time. Coffee? I gestured toward the dining room. The antique table now hosted my laptop, a neat stack of folders, and 3 leather portfolios embossed with BRH in gold. We have a lot to discuss. Discuss? Dad's voice rose. Cloverbank says you own this house through some company that there's no mortgage to transfer. Brennan Revival Holdings, I said, walking past them, expecting them to follow. They did. My company. Please sit. They settled into the chairs they'd occupied yesterday. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Mom's hands shook slightly as she arranged herself. What game are you playing, Callie? Wyatt found his voice, though it lacked yesterday's confidence. I turned my laptop toward them. The dashboard gleamed with property addresses, value assessments, and ROI calculations. This isn't a game, it's a business. My business. With 3 keystrokes, the screen shifted to a scrolling portfolio: apartment buildings, commercial properties, historic homes, vacant lots transformed into revenue-generating investments. 26 properties. I let the number hang in the air. Currently valued at approximately $4.7 million. Dad's banker eyes widened, calculating in real time. Mom's mouth opened but produced no sound. Wyatt leaned forward, scanning the addresses until recognition flashed across his face. He stabbed a finger at the screen. That's our building. Hancock Plaza. I met his gaze evenly. Your firm's lease expires in 2 months. Davidson Partners has expressed interest in the space. They're willing to pay 12% above market. Dad's face flushed crimson. This is absurd. You can't possibly own the building where your son works. I finished for him, my voice steady. The one you advised me was a foolish investment at the chamber dinner last year. I retrieved a folder and slid it across the polished wood, an echo of his gesture yesterday. The same building you told the Kensington Group would be a maintenance nightmare when you heard I was considering properties downtown. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. You've been... Mom struggled to find words appropriate for her country club vocabulary. Playing house caretaker while secretly buying property? Not secretly. Privately. I opened another folder. Remember when I asked to discuss business at Thanksgiving 3 years ago? You suggested I focus on finding a nice man who knows about these things. When I mentioned real estate at Christmas, you changed the subject to Wyatt's promotion. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed the half hour. 10 chimes until I needed to be downtown. Who would loan you money for all this? Dad's banker brain was still searching for the flaw in my foundation. The telephone interrupted with perfect timing. I pressed the speaker button. Morning, Eleanor. You're on with my family. Good morning, Callie. Eleanor Hayes' voice filled the room. Crisp, professional, formidable. I have the updated lease agreements ready. Shall I review the terms? Please. Mom's face strained of color as Eleanor detailed the formal lease. Agreement for the family home, $2,650 monthly, 2-year minimum term, security deposit required. This is outrageous. Dad stood abruptly. I'll contest this. Our family lawyers will. You'll need new lawyers. I closed the folder calmly. I bought out Martindale and Reed last year. They're part of my business holdings now. His mouth opened and closed without sound. For the first time in my life, Douglas Brennan had no words. Wyatt found his voice first. How did you manage all this? Where did you get the capital? Perhaps you should have asked that question years ago. I turned slightly. Lottie, would you mind joining us? Lottie Green stepped in from the kitchen, her silver hair caught in the morning sunlight. At 76, she stood straighter than my mother ever had. The woman they'd always referred to as the housekeeper held a leather portfolio identical to mine. Miss Lottie was grandmother's silent partner in 3 rental properties, I explained. When you all were too busy to visit, she taught me what grandmother had taught her, how to see value where others saw only surfaces. Mom's shoulders stiffened at the revelation, another piece of family mythology crumbling. The lease agreements need signatures by Friday. I stood, signaling the end of our meeting. My downtown office can handle the paperwork if you'd prefer not to return here. Dad's face darkened with the threat of an explosion. You can't possibly expect. I expect exactly what you've always expected, Dad. Business is business. I gathered my laptop. Family is family. Yesterday, you decided which mattered more. Wyatt stared at the property list, lingering on his firm's address. The power shift registered in his eyes, the first authentic emotion I'd seen from him in years. I walked them to the door, professional courtesy in every step. As they filed out in stunned silence, I called after them. Oh, and Wyatt? Congratulations again on your engagement. I closed the door on their retreating figures and leaned against it, allowing myself 5 seconds of vulnerability before straightening. Through the window, I watched Dad's BMW back carefully off my lawn, as if only now realizing he was on someone else's property. Lottie placed a weathered hand on my shoulder. Your grandmother would be proud, child. The validation I never received from my family washed over me, warm and genuine. But the day was young, and I had an empire to run. A few days later, on Wednesday, the country club of Grand Rapids rose like a fortress on manicured grounds. This was Dad's chosen battlefield. I parked my practical, paid-off Volvo beside Dad's gleaming Lexus and Wyatt's leased BMW. Inside, the scent of lemon polish and old money hung heavy. Dad waited at his regular table, back straight, silver hair perfect. Mom sat beside him, fingers twisting her pearl necklace. Wyatt paced nearby, phone pressed to his ear. Voice low but urgent. Callie. Dad rose slightly as I approached, a gesture of courtesy more than respect. We appreciate you coming. I slid into the leather chair. Your message mentioned an emergency. Wyatt ended his call, his collar unbuttoned, a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead. Nice of you to make time in your busy schedule. Douglas, please, Mom touched Dad's sleeve. Let's order. First. Just coffee, I said, my voice carrying more authority than it would have a month ago. Dad leaned forward, lowering his voice. This situation has gone far enough, Callie. Your Mother hasn't slept in days. This will kill her, you understand. Mom dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. My health isn't the issue, I said, accepting the coffee. Neither is Mom's sleep schedule. Listen to yourself. Wyatt's voice rose, heads turning at nearby tables. He caught himself, leaning in. Do you understand what you've done? Mackenzie Palmer canceled our dinner last night, said they weren't comfortable socializing until our family matters were resolved. Mackenzie Palmer, Wyatt's biggest client prospect. I tasted victory bitter and sweet. And just this morning, Dad continued, Bill Harrington called me personally. Wanted to know if there was trouble with the Brennan finances since you've apparently been meeting with his investment group. I sipped my coffee, letting the silence stretch. Bill's considering financing my next 3 properties. This is insanity. Dad slammed his palm on the table, rattling the china. Where did you even get your initial capital? Who would loan money to a woman with no banking connections? I finished for him. FHA loans on the first 2 properties. Private equity from investors who believed in preservation. Then I reinvested every penny of profit. Mom shook her head. If you needed money, you should have come to us. I needed respect more than money. Wyatt snorted. Is that what this is about? Some childhood grudge because we didn't praise your finger paintings enough. No, I met his gaze steadily. It's about sitting at the dinner table for 30 years listening to you dismiss everything I cared about while you plotted to take my home. Your home. Dad's face flushed red. That house has been in our family for 5 generations. And grandmother left it to me. Not the family trust. Not Wyatt. Me. Dad waved the waiter away. I've spoken with 3 different attorneys, he said, once we were alone again. There are ways to challenge an inheritance when the beneficiary clearly lacks. My attorney will be happy to speak with your 4th lawyer, I said, placing my napkin on the table. Though you might have trouble finding one locally. Eleanor Hayes has connections with most firms in the area. Mom gasped. Eleanor? From the foundation board? She's quite effective. You recommended her yourself at a garden party once, said she was terrifyingly thorough, if I recall correctly. Wyatt's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face drained of color. It's Brad Thompson. He's canceling our lease renewal meeting. He looked up at me. Davidson Partners made a competitive offer for that space. I didn't mention that I'd already rejected it. Let him sweat a little longer. You can't do this. Dad's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. I've called in favors at Michigan First. They're reviewing your loan portfolio. I refinanced through Clover Bank 6 months ago. I stood, smoothing my skirt. Dad, your banking connections can't touch me anymore. Then I'll make sure everyone in our circle knows exactly what kind of daughter you've become. Mom's voice trembled with anger or fear, perhaps both. They already know, I said, shouldering my bag. Lottie ran into you at Kingma's Market yesterday. Quite a scene from what I heard. Mom's cheeks flamed. That woman had no right to speak to me that way. That woman helped me secure my first investment property while you were telling the Hendersons I was finding myself after a nervous breakdown. Kelly. Wyatt stood, desperation replacing anger. Be reasonable. We can work something out. We already have. I placed my business card on the table. The family home lease agreement expires Friday. I'll need your decision by then. Dad pushed the card away. This isn't over. It is. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Wyatt? I heard rumors about restructuring at Lakewood Partners. Might want to update your resume. The sunlight outside felt cleansing after the stifling club atmosphere. I drove straight to Oak Hill Cemetery, where grandmother's grave sat beneath a maple tree, simple and elegant. I placed fresh gardenias beside her name, the scent filling the spring air. They never saw it coming, I whispered, touching the cool stone. Just like you said. Her voice echoed in my memory. They'll never see your worth until you own it yourself, Calliope. Tears came suddenly. Not from pain, but release. For years I'd hidden my success, seeking approval that never came. Now, I stood in the sunlight, owning both my accomplishments and their consequences. My phone buzzed. With a text from Eleanor. Douglas hired Sampson's firm, already called to discuss settlement. Options. I smiled through my tears. Tomorrow, I'd sign the lease for my new downtown office. Above, Madcap Coffee. The business plan for the River District revitalization sat ready in my briefcase. 6 years of quiet work were finally bearing fruit. Across town, Wyatt faced restructuring rumors. Dad discovered his banking favors had limits. Mom learned that social standing was as fragile as crystal. I placed my hand on grandmother's headstone one last time. I'm ready for whatever comes next. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang. It was Wyatt. I let it go to voicemail. Some conversations can wait until the ground beneath us all has finished shifting. A month later, the glossy business card between my fingers read, Wyatt Brennan, former senior account executive. Former, such a small word to mark such a seismic shift. I pinned it to my office corkboard with deliberate care, next to the newspaper clipping featuring my latest downtown restoration project. He called again this morning, Eleanor said, setting a fresh coffee on my desk. Third time this week. Let me guess, more threats about family reputation? Eleanor's laugh came quick and genuine. Quite the opposite. He wanted to know if you'd be willing to provide a reference. The coffee scalded my tongue. I set it down too quickly, sloshing liquid onto the quarterly reports. Wyatt Brennan, golden child, heir apparent, country club darling, needs my reference. His company cited family complications in the termination paperwork, Eleanor continued, dabbing at the spilled coffee with a handkerchief. Apparently, uncertainty about their building lease created shareholder concern. The building I now own. Did you know, I said, turning to the window overlooking Main Street, that Dad stopped golfing at Lakeview Country Club? Membership dues suddenly became unreasonable. The world tilts on unexpected axes, doesn't it? Outside, workers installed the new sign on the Victorian building across the street, my newest acquisition, the 5th property I'd purchased since that Sunday dinner 1 month ago. Each transaction was another brick in a wall between my past and future. Francine called Lottie yesterday, Eleanor mentioned, settling into the leather chair opposite my desk. Apparently, your mother's bridge club has dwindled to just her and Margaret Phillips, the one whose husband owns half the car dealerships in town. The very same, though. I hear she only showed up to ask about investing in your next property. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, surprising us both. Not malicious, just genuine amusement at life's strange symmetry. For years, I was the family disappointment. Now I was the sole Brennan with financial stability. 2 more mortgage applications came through this morning, Eleanor said, sliding folders across my polished desk. Both historic properties on Cherry Street. The bank approval was unusually swift. The same bank where Dad once wielded influence like a scepter. The same loan officers who once dismissed my business plan now expedited my paperwork. Did you see this? I handed Eleanor yesterday's newspaper, folded to a 1/4-page spread, about community revitalization. My photo appeared beneath the headline, *Local Entrepreneur. Preserve city's architectural heritage, *, your grandmother would have loved this, Eleanor said. Softly. She knew before I did. I touched the vintage watch on my wrist. She left me the house. Because she saw what they couldn't. My phone buzzed with a text from Lottie. * your father is at the doctor's office. Blood pressure concerns. Don't worry, Helen from the pharmacy keeps me updated. * small towns have their advantages. Another text followed immediately. * Francine tried joining the Historical Society board. They suggested donor status instead. * the society where I'd been treasurer for 3 years. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant. Instead, something unexpectedly tender unfolded in my chest. Not quite pity, not quite compassion, but something adjacent to both. Mrs. Coopersmith called, Eleanor mentioned, gathering her notes. Wants advice about her daughter's real estate classes. The same Mrs. Coopersmith who told me investing in those old buildings was foolish at last year's chamber dinner. People recognize success when they see it, Eleanor said, standing, straightening her impeccable suit, just like they recognize failure. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet of my office. The antique grandfather clock in the corner, salvaged from a condemned hotel, ticked away minutes in the same measured cadence as the one in grandmother's hallway. My hallway now. I didn't call Dad about his blood pressure. I didn't text Mom about her social standing. I didn't reach out to Wyatt about his job search. Their problems weren't mine to solve, just as my success wasn't theirs to claim. Yet I didn't block their numbers either. The afternoon light shifted, painting gold rectangles across my desk. Calendar. 3 properties under contract. 2 renovation projects nearing completion. 1. Community Foundation grant application pending for the historic theater restoration. My empire. Built not on revenge but on vision. My success was measured not by their downfall but by my creation. The receptionist buzzed an hour later. Miss Brennan? Your brother is here. My finger hovered over the intercom button, a heartbeat of hesitation. Send him in. Wyatt looked different. Smaller somehow, without the protective shell of family expectations. His collar sat slightly crooked, his eyes lacking their usual confidence. I've been waiting downstairs for almost an hour, he said, remaining standing even when I gestured toward a chair. Nice coffee. Shop. One of my tenants. Right. He shoved his hands into his pockets. Of course. The silence between us had weight, decades of competition compressed into molecules of air. I underestimated you, he finally said, each word costing him visibly. We all did. For the first time in our relationship, I didn't interrupt, didn't defend, didn't explain. I simply listened as the grandfather clock marked time between us, each tick a tiny monument to change. Thursday that week, I spotted them the moment I walked into Giovanni's, my parents sitting at a corner table beneath vintage photographs of the Italian coast. The restaurant's amber lighting cast a forgiving glow over Mom's worried expression and Dad's too stiff posture. Not a chance meeting. Their Mercedes parked right next to my usual spot confirmed what I already knew. An ambush disguised as reconciliation. Mom waved, her bracelet catching the light. I nodded too, the hostess, and walked toward them, my heels clicking against the terracotta tiles. Callie. Mom rose, arms extended for an embrace that felt rehearsed. What a wonderful surprise. Is it? I settled into the chair across from them, placing my bag beside me. Your car is parked next to my regular spot. Dad cleared his throat, adjusting his color. Always observant. The waiter arrived with water and took our drink orders. I requested a Cabernet while Mom ordered her usual Chardonnay. Dad stuck with sparkling water, doctor's orders for his blood pressure, no doubt. You look well, Mom said, studying my face. That cream blouse is lovely. With your coloring. I thanked her, though we both knew this conversation wasn't about fashion. Beneath the table, I noticed Dad's fingers drumming against his thigh, his telltale sign of rehearsed talking points waiting to be delivered. We've been doing some thinking, Dad began once our drinks arrived. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that authoritative banker's tone that closed thousands of deals. About family. Legacy, about forgiveness. Douglas, Mom touched his arm, her eyes suddenly wet with tears. Let me. She turned to me, voice quavering. Callie, we're not getting any younger. Family should stick together, especially at our age. I took a slow sip of wine, letting the silence stretch between us. Giovanni's filled with the sounds of other diners, genuine laughter. Conversations without agendas. Mom, Dad, I placed my glass down carefully. I appreciate you reaching out, I do. Dad nodded, relief washing over his features. Too soon. But I need you to understand something, I continued. When I returned home years ago, you saw it as a failure. When I cared for grandmother, you saw it as wasted potential. When I inherited her home, you saw it as something To control. Mom started to interrupt, but I raised my hand gently. I'm not angry anymore, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it, but I won't pretend those years of dismissal didn't happen. Remember when I tried to discuss my first property at Thanksgiving 4 years ago? You changed the subject to Wyatt's promotion. When I mentioned real estate classes, you suggested I focus on finding someone instead. The memory of their exchanged glances that day still stung. But the pain had dulled to a distant throb rather than an open wound. We were concerned, Dad said, his voice softer than usual. The market was unstable. You were embarrassed. I corrected him without heat. And that's okay. I don't need your approval anymore. I love you both, but my life and my business decisions aren't up for family vote. Mom's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. Then why agree to meet us? Because you're still my parents. I'm setting boundaries, not cutting ties. Dad straightened his silverware. Buying time. What exactly does that mean, practically speaking? It means I'll join family gatherings where I'm treated as an equal adult. It means questions about my business come from genuine interest, not judgment. It means accepting that my path is different but not lesser than what you imagined for me. The waiter appeared to take our orders and we paused. I requested the eggplant parmesan, suddenly hungry in a way I hadn't been during family meals in years. After he left, Dad attempted a different approach. The country club is hosting a business mixer next month. Perhaps you could attend as our guest. Make some connections. Before I could respond, I spotted Wyatt entering the restaurant, scanning tables until he saw us. I'd texted him early, my own strategic move. I invited Wyatt to join us, I said as he approached. The surprise on my parents' faces was genuine. Our last family gathering had ended with Wyatt storming out after learning about my ownership of his office building. Hope I'm not interrupting, Wyatt said, pulling up a chair. His tie was loosened, his usual polish slightly dimmed after weeks of job searching. Perfect timing, I said, reaching into my bag. Mom and Dad were just leaving. Their confusion was palpable. But we haven't even ordered. Mom protested. I need to speak with Wyatt privately, I explained. We can continue our conversation this weekend at my house as family, not as negotiators. After reluctant goodbyes and Mom's lingering backward glance, they left. The tension at the table dissipated like fog burning off in the morning sun. I slid a manila folder across the table to Wyatt, watching his face as he opened it. Head of Legal Strategy at Brennan Revival Holdings, he read, eyebrows rising. This is a job offer? The base salary is less than you're used to, I said, pointing to the compensation details. But there's real equity, not a handout. Wyatt, a position you'll earn through actual work. His fingers traced the company logo, an oak leaf, grandmother's favorite. Why would you do this? After everything. Because you're good at what you do. Because beneath the competition, you understand property law. Because we're still family, even when it's complicated. His hand shook slightly as he signed the offer letter. Without argument, a first in our adult relationship. I've been jealous, he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. For years, I convinced myself I was concerned about your choices. Truth is, I envied how easily you walked away from expectations. It wasn't easy, I corrected him. Just necessary. I need to ask. Will Mom and Dad really be at your house this weekend? I nodded, filling him in on my plan as our meals arrived. For the first time in years, we talked without keeping score. About grandmother, about property values in the historic district, about his fiancé's family pressure. Real conversation, no pretense, no competition. When I described the revised lease agreement I'd prepared for our parents, a bit different from a month ago, his eyes widened. You're really going to make them sign a rental agreement for their family home? For my home, I corrected him gently, and yes, some boundaries need paperwork. He raised his water glass in a toast. 2. The sister I underestimated. I clinked my glass against his. To second chances earned, not given. 6 months later, I poured coffee into grandmother's Wedgwood cups, the familiar blue. Flowers dancing along the rim. Sunlight streamed through the leaded glass windows, catching the silver serving tray where it had always sat for Sunday dinners. 6 months can change everything. And nothing at all. This roast is excellent, Dad said, accepting the cup with a nod that contained more respect than 30 years of previous interactions. His burgundy sweater matched the season, but the country club insignia was noticeably absent. Lottie recommended the local roaster, I said, settling into grandmother's chair at the head of the table, a position that once would have seemed impossible. They sourced directly from farmers. Mom straightened the linen napkin in her lap. I visited that shop yesterday. Margaret from the garden club mentioned their pastries. The conversation flowed with new rhythms, words once bitten back now spoken freely, names once dismissed now referenced with interest. Wyatt arrived last, kissing my cheek before taking his seat. Sorry I'm late. The Henderson contract needed final revisions. You're making good progress with them, I said, watching his face brighten with earned pride rather than entitlement. The doorbell chimed. That'll be Lottie, I announced, rising to welcome her. Dad stood too, something he never would have done 6 months ago for someone he once classified as the help. The subtle shift spoke volumes. Lottie entered wearing a coral dress that complemented her silver hair. She carried a small bouquet of fresh-cut flowers from her garden. These tables have turned quite nicely, she whispered as I hugged her. Her knowing eyes held decades of wisdom about families in their complicated dances. We settled around the dining table, the same polished oak surface where they once tried to take my home. Now they paid rent with both money and respect, the lease agreement framed by relationships rebuilding brick by brick. Douglas, Lottie addressed my father directly. Your suggestion about the Miller Street property was spot on. The Historical Commission approved our proposal yesterday. Dad straightened, pleased. The original moldings were worth preserving. I noticed similar features in the Westfield building downtown. The conversation turned to business. Naturally, without the forced exclusion of previous years. Mom asked thoughtful questions about the neighborhood revival project. Wyatt outlined the legal strategy he was developing to protect historic properties from developers. I never thought I'd enjoy corporate law outside the big firms, he admitted, helping himself to more potatoes. But there's something satisfying about building something with real community impact. You always had good instincts, I told him. You just needed the right application. The grandfather clock chimed in the hallway, marking time. That now flowed forward instead of stagnating in old patterns. I always knew you'd build something lasting, Callie, Lottie said during a lull-in conversation. You see value where others see only surfaces. Her words bridged generations of women who understood worth beyond society's narrow measures. Later, as spring sunshine warmed the garden, I stood alone at the window watching them. Mom and Lottie discussing perennial borders. Dad and Wyatt examining the repaired porch railing. Family reforming around truth instead of pretense. Tomorrow, I'd mentor 3 young women interested in real estate investment. Next week, we'd close on the Thompson Building, another historic property saved from demolition. The business grew alongside healing relationships. I touched grandmother's watch on my wrist, feeling her presence in every corner of this house she entrusted to me. The journey from invisible daughter to respected businesswoman required no validation but my own. Some walls need not be torn down but simply remodeled, with the original foundation kept intact. Some keys unlock more than doors, they unlock a future built on your own terms.